As I'm sure most of you would guess, I don't typically wait around for the next episode of Tucker Carlson's Fox News propaganda program, but I actually was curious as to what the program would look like last night. Over the weekend, as we covered yesterday, there was a horrifying terrorist mass shooting targeting black people in Buffalo, New York, in which in total, 10 people were killed and 13 injured. The 18-year-old white domestic-born shooter, inspired by the ideas of the Great Replacement and white birth rates that have been just everywhere on right-wing media over the last few years. The shooter went to Buffalo looking to kill black people, and indeed he killed many black people. And I was waiting to see, how is Tucker Carlson going to spin it? How is Ben Shapiro going to spin it? How is Fox News going to spin it? Well, we immediately saw, as we looked at yesterday, Fox News talking about video game violence and continuing to fearmonger about terrorist immigrants coming over the U.S.-Mexico border. So we saw the general Fox News approach. But the shooter's manifesto had almost verbatim language that we saw on the Tucker Carlson program. So the question was, what's Tucker going to say? And we're going to look at clips. And it was truly a surreal episode in absolutely every way. How was Tucker going to do it? How was Tucker going to separate himself? How was he going to minimize? Well, part of it, bizarrely, included talking about Rwanda, if you can believe it. I'm talking about the African country of Rwanda. A completely, I can't think of a better term for it, Kafkaesque episode of the Tucker Carlson program. So let's start with the first clip in which Tucker tries to distance himself as well as Fox News from the Buffalo shooter, who was, of course, inspired by the conspiracy theories that Tucker and others have been pushing. Take a look at this.
But what he wrote does not add up to a manifesto. It is not a blueprint for a new extremist political movement, much less the potential inspiration for a racist revolution. Anyone who claims that it is lying or has...
Well, if you read it, you realize that that's exactly what it is. It's taking the conspiracy theories that Tucker and others have been repeating on their programs and saying, well, the solution is we've got to go and kill people who aren't white. And that's what he did.
Hasn't read it. Instead, Gendron's letter is a rambling pastiche of slogans and internet memes, some of which flatly contradict one another. The document is not recognizably left-wing or right-wing. It's not really political at all.
That's obviously completely untrue because it aligns with the exact political ideology espoused by those surrounding Donald Trump and on this so-called populist right, where they sound all about the middle class, but then the solutions are, well, we've got to do something about these non-white immigrants coming into the country.
The document is crazy. It's the product of a diseased and organized mind.
And remember, to some degree, we can say there's something mentally not working with these folks. But as I mentioned before yesterday, the manifesto is quite cogent and coherent as far as these manifestos go. And writing this off as simply mental illness doesn't make any sense. And remember, most mentally ill people never commit any violence.
At one point, Gendron suggests that Fox News is part of some global conspiracy against him. He writes like the mental patient he is, disjointed, irrational, paranoid. Now, that's true, not that it makes the atrocities he committed easier to bear. If your daughter was murdered on Saturday in Buffalo, you wouldn't care why the killer did it or who he voted for. But the truth about Peyton Gendron does tell you a lot about the ruthlessness and dishonesty of our political leadership. Within minutes of Saturday's shooting, before all of the bodies of those 10 murdered Americans had even been identified by their loved ones, professional Democrats had begun a coordinated campaign to blame those murders on their political opponents. They did it, they said, immediately. Patron Gendron was the heir to Donald Trump.
Okay, so listen, I am sympathetic to the fraught nature of immediately making political declarations. That's why often with these cases, I won't cover it the next day. In this case, it happened on a weekend, so we had time. To the extent that anybody, before we had information, made any claims that weren't yet based in fact, that's wrong, and I would denounce that. I didn't actually see that, but I also didn't pay attention to the news on the day of. I read about everything after the fact. But the manifesto can be seen only as an almost verbatim reproduction of the things we've heard from Tucker and from other right-wing media. Now, as I mentioned earlier, at one point, Tucker talked about Rwanda. He put up a quote from 2004 New York Times about Rwanda and the Rwandan genocide. Just, I mean, completely bizarre stuff. And that at another moment, Tucker again focused on this was just a lone mentally ill guy. That's it.
Because a mentally ill teenager murdered strangers, you cannot be allowed to express your political views out loud. That's what they're telling you. That's what they've wanted to tell you for a long time. But Saturday's massacre gives them a pretext, a justification.
So playing on the idea that all of a sudden now, because of one mentally ill guy, completely disconnected from any political rhetoric, I mean, other than the fact that the manifesto contains verbatim rhetoric from my show, me being speaking as Tucker here, what really this is about silencing your political views. Imagine being so depraved or dishonest or ignorant, I don't know which it is with Tucker, to pretend that what this is really about is simply silencing the political speech of people like Tucker who just want to give their opinions. Now, again, this thing of mentally ill, when you look at the manifesto, it's articulate, fascist, racist, anti-Semitic hate linked to ideas that we've seen propagated by Tucker and others, which we will look at again later in the show. Something is obviously wrong with people who commit these acts of violence. But the mental illness, the merely mental illness line used to excuse the political reality of these people's motivations is immoral and or dishonest and maybe just ignorant. But I have a hard time believing that with Tucker, it's ignorant. So a bizarre Tucker Carlson show, almost as bizarre as what Ben Shapiro had to say, which we're going to go to next. Science has shown us that lowering your body temperature at night improves sleep in many ways. Our sponsor, Chili Sleep, creates systems that cool down your bed, promoting deeper, higher quality sleep. It also just feels great. I use it at home. I'd recommend it to anyone, and I've recommended it to some friends who now use it as well. Chili Sleep's product, the Ooler, the Cube, and the Dock Pro, they're all water-based, temperature-controlled pads that fit onto your existing mattress. You can keep your bed as low as 55 degrees, as hot as 115 degrees. I like 60. Their new Dock Pro sleep system has double the cooling power of other models, 5 times the cooling contact, whisper quiet. You can control it with your phone. It's awesome. With Chili Sleep, there's no more feeling hot at night, no more sweating. Cooling your bed down like this is amazing. You really have to try it for yourself. When you go to chilisleep.com/Pacman, you'll get 30% off the Ooler and Cube sleep systems and 10% off the new Dock Pro. This offer is only for my audience. The link is down below.